Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen. Excited to have Chet Kapoor back on the show. Chet, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for inviting me back. So I didn't screw it up too badly last time.
I told you we were going to have you on every year, but I still don't think that's enough. I think we should do some extra ones.
Thank you.
So for people who missed last episode, why don't I give a couple of life career highlights and have you fill in the blanks I missed? Is that okay?
Please.
Okay. Born and raised in Calcutta. Read a book called The Little Kingdom by Michael Moritz, now of a huge venture capital fame, but just about Steve Jobs and decided there and then you wanted to come to America and work for Steve Jobs, and you actually pulled it off and can work for Steve Jobs at Next, and then went on to do a number of interesting things. Joined Active Software and was part of the team that took them public, did the same thing at BEA, joined Apogee, pre-product, pre-revenue. I was there for about a decade, growing them to the point that Google had to have you guys and paid $640 million for the privilege, and spent another 3 years or so over at Google, but had the itch to do it over again and build like a truly durable company. And came and joined DataStax and is taking over the world of artificial intelligence. How am I doing?
You're doing absolutely great. Absolutely great.
Tell me another highlight I missed in there.
It was really interesting. Earlier this week, I got a chance to meet with the Dean of the Air Force Academy. And we spent 90 minutes talking about a bunch of things. And, as a dean for the Air Force Academy for our country, she was very interested in the learning experience after you finish a higher education. So we talked a little bit about Next. And I was very clear that, I was the guy that got coffee for the person that made coffee. Right. So that's just to set the stage. But there were two things that were very important for me that actually set the stage for the rest of my career very early on at Next. One was, it's all about the people, right? And the reason it's about the people is not just because how qualified they are, but you need to set up an environment where you should expect more and they can deliver more than they ever thought they could themselves. Right? This is a, can I fly? The answer is obviously you can fly. Just believing in something bigger than what they are and attaching their hearts to it, not their minds to it. It's not a job. It's something that changes the world, I think is really, really important. And that's the people part. It's not just talent, but it's creating the environment for the talent to excel beyond their imagination. That was one. And then the second one was, don't start with the impact that you're going to have on the world around you and how you're going to change it to be a better place, right? And Steve was very good at both of those. There were many things he was not good at, right? But those two, he was absolutely probably in the top 10 in the last 150 years that I know of, right? And so learning that very early in my career made a big difference to the next 20 or 30 years of my life, working in the Valley.
What's something else inspirational about Steve that, like, outsiders who didn't actually know him, we've only seen the press or the movies, what's something we wouldn't know that you actually got from working with him?
I'll tell you what I didn't get. How is that? Right? Because I think that's because a lot of people will talk about all the greatness, and he's phenomenal, right? I mean, think about this. Think about the Mac I'm using. It's all like, I think with what came with the "you are awesome and you can do more than you think" came with the "you are shit. You are not doing what you're capable of." And that had a very few people survived that part, right? Because it is a very high, but when he took people down, it was a very low. And a lot of people didn't survive ever coming back up, right? Because they couldn't tolerate that environment. And so that was the part that I realized that was not who I was. There's a different way to lead and making it happen. But I think, but I would still go back to, if there's a way to create an environment where people can do far more than they ever thought, great things will happen.
So let's talk about this for 1 second, because I just finished the Elon Musk book by Walter Isaacson, and, such an inspirational guy, so many amazing things, and some similar failures to Steve Jobs in the way that, at least in my opinion, sounds like yourself as well, was unnecessarily harsh with people at times. Do you have any thoughts about really exceeding expectations without having to be exceedingly harsh?
I do, and we could actually spend the entire the entire time just talking about this. So I'll go back to what I believe in. I believe that the only way you can be a great leader is the best manifestation of yourself, because you need to lead yourself before you can lead people. And that is to be a continuity that is genuine and aligned. You cannot say, here's who I am and here's how I'm a leader. They need to be it is one person, and to make that happen. So, and I don't understand Elon Musk that well. It's on my list of books. I've gone back and forth because Walter Isaacson is so good. I've gone back and forth on should I read the book or not, just because I don't understand Elon well enough, but I will. But just being around Steve and reading the book and, hanging out with a lot of people who know him well, there was genuinely a streak to him, which was not a genuinely good person. There was a streak to him, and it happened very early on in his life, and it showed up. Like I say, these are childhood issues. I personally believe that it is very much possible to lead without being nasty, if I may. But it is impossible to lead without using fear. It is impossible. Leading has to have a manifestation of love and fear. And if you just think you're going to do it through love, I don't believe you can do that. Now, the question is how much fear you use, how you use fear. There are different techniques on how you make that happen, but you have to use fear.
I also think that sometimes on the I don't know, for me, it's like violence. It's like Gandhi said, right? About violence is almost never the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer.
Correct.
That's from Gandhi, right?
Yes.
And you like this idea of trying to pretend that there aren't real consequences. During
Right.
this is not the Boy Scouts, this is not elementary school, it's not T-ball, everybody doesn't get a turn. If we don't deliver for customers, they will go elsewhere. This is just honesty. I mean, you can call it fear. I don't know. Do you have a different thought on that?
No, very much so. And just we have a weekly all hands. I just got done with it. And the big thing I talk about, love is all the good news. Hey, this is what's going well. Our customers are doing well. They're grateful. We help them out. We change their trajectories. They love the products we build. Oh my God, we sucked. Right. And somebody smacked us around, and making sure that is also shared and people know that we need to get better at some things. And actually, when you do that, you need to spend a few minutes wallowing in the suck, as I call it, right? You just have to sit there for a few minutes. You don't just dismiss it, because it needs to become part, and you need to feel it enough that you make sure you don't do it again, right? So my take is you absolutely have to. And sometimes, and a different way to put this, if I may, is the balance between patience and impatience. It is a choice a leader makes about 100 times a day in everything they do. Should I be patient with this discussion or be impatient? And when you're impatient, fear comes out, right? And you have to find a way to move it around and say, let's talk about why I'm being impatient. And you add the love portion to it. But generally, there's a fear component, right? We will fail if we don't do it. That's impatient, right? And so I absolutely believe there's a way to do it. But you do have to make it real, right? It is not, this is, like I say very often, activities don't pay for college educations, right? And so and you just have to make sure it's careful, because you have to be careful, because impressions can be long lasting.
Well, let's switch gears. I want to talk about DataStax. For people, I know valuations are all over the place these days. How can we give people a sense for how awesome you guys, how you're not like a little garage company, you're taking over the world here. How can we give people a sense of scale and accomplishment so far?
So I start that's great. And again, we can talk about DataStax for months here. So I just start with a simple thing that I did at an investment conference recently. And I just asked the audience, do you use Netflix? Do you use Starbucks? Do you ever gotten a phone provision by AT&T or Verizon? Do you use Spotify? And let's take the Netflix example. All your relevance, all the recommendations you have, the recommendation engine. If you ever use iCloud, right? All the backups, all of that happens with technology that was built by us. right? Apache Cassandra is an open source project. It scales like crazy. Anything that is a large app in the world, whether it's on an iPhone or a web app, it's all about Apache Cassandra. We've been doing that for the last 13 years, right? And very, very successfully. I can go through the brands, 60% of FedEx's data, and on and on and on, right? And so, but here's the interesting thing. Something called Chat GPT happened to us last year, and we went to 100 million users in 2 months. It's never happened in technology before. Never. So people have recognized, and for very good reasons, right? It's about foundations and it's about what we've done with the interface and LLMs and all those things, right? That's awesome. But generative AI is real. It's real, and it's going to, and we should talk a little bit more about it. It is going to go and actually change every industry faster than it has ever happened before. There is no AI without data. There's none. It is, by the way, it's well recognized. You need data. And it's not the data that the LLMs have behind the API. It is the data about you and me, because that part cannot be in the LLM, right? That's the part that you actually have to use. And so we are the ones that actually have the data in our products, and taking that and make it relevant or giving contextual information to the LLMs without screwing up privacy and security is what we do. So we feel like the market has come to us, because you cannot build, US Bank cannot build a generative AI app without my data. FedEx cannot give me information about my tracking my package without my data. And the LLM's not going to have that, and it never will, right? So this is beautiful opportunity that the market has come to. And the good news is we are changing perceptions very, very quickly. We're with technology that has been scaling. So it's not like, there's going to take 3 years before we have mature technology. We already have that. We have hundreds of customers. We have thousands and thousands of developers that are using our product. So we feel like this is like the most perfect time for us to be in. Like I would say, this is like we love the zone that we're in.
Yeah. As far as giving people a scale for how much success DataStax has already have, what can we tell people?
We're over $200 million, growing extremely fast. We do some things for our customers on they self-managed. We have a self-managed product. We actually have a cloud product, and now we have what we call a vector database that is available in both forms for self-managed as well as a managed product. But the most important thing is it's not just good enough to have databases, right? We obviously do that really well. We've been doing it for many, 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 many years and very successfully. But we are very much in the business of enterprises delivering Gen AI apps as soon as possible, right? So we look at things like RAG, and so retrieval augmented generation. We look at all these different techniques and say, what can we contribute to help customers, go and actually make sure that they can deliver these Gen AI apps fast.
That's great. Are you saying 200 million a year in like ARR? Is that
yes,
what the 200
very
million?
much so, and growing very fast.
Congratulations. Let's go through a use case. Let's talk about an ideal customer and what you help them with.
So, can I just let me step back for a second, because I think this will be relevant, and I'll talk about many customers. The reason Gen AI will go faster than every other wave we've had is because unlike client server and mainframe where there was a discontinuity, this one actually builds on web, it builds on mobile, as well as it builds on cloud, right? So that's why it'll go really, really quickly. The second thing about Gen AI, it has ramifications on efficiency as well as revenue. There are business models that haven't even fathomed that are going to come together in making this happen. So as you think about this, how are enterprises going to adapt or adopt generative AI? I think it's going to happen like every other wave, except faster. People will start with incremental use cases. And The second thing they'll do is transformative use cases. Now, not all companies, a small startup with 2 people and a dog is different from FedEx or, Verizon or whatever else it might be. There's a big gap. So we actually think about companies in 2 categories, right? Small and medium-sized companies, and it starts from, a startup all the way to maybe a company like Priceline, right? And then you have large enterprises that are regulated, that have large brands, that have to be really careful. The incremental use cases in the SMB world is happening now, like now, right? I mean, people are going off and making it happen. The incremental use cases for large enterprises are starting to happen, but they will probably get implemented in the 6 or 9 month range. Why? Not because they don't understand it. They just have to be careful, because if you go to a financial institution and somehow the AI hallucinates and gives you the wrong information, they are liable for it. So they have to be more careful in regulated industries that have really awesome brands. Transformative use cases when it gets really good. The SMBs are going to go off and do that in the next 6 to 9 months because they are moving quickly. They want to disrupt the large companies and go off and take advantages on efficiency as well as new revenue models. The larger enterprises will take 24 months to make that happen. So there is a lot happening in industry, but it's being paced with incremental or transformative use cases. And then the size of the company does make a difference. So let's talk about some examples, right? SkyPoint is a healthcare company, and they are revolutionizing operational efficiency in healthcare, and they do it all for senior care. So they actually are using our Astra database for quick retrieval and understanding of all healthcare data, and they do personalized recommendations that human beings used to do before, right? So they're bringing AI to actually have personalized recommendations for every patient. So this frees up about 10 hours a week. Imagine 10 hours a week for doctors who can focus on care, who can focus on, who can go off and actually talk to the patient and spend time doing that, right? Instead of focusing on, let me make sure all the data is coming together, let me do a lot of inputting and things like that. 40 hours a week is great. So that is clearly an efficiency use case that SkyPoint, and Thyssen is just a great leader. And I would call them in the SMB space, right? They've already implemented it and they're going really, really hard. There's a company called PhysicsWallah, and this is a unicorn in India. We actually just talked about it at All Hands. Think of this as a Khan Academy, but actually doing it for the Indian market, right? With all the translations from Hindi to English, as well as being able to ask questions, because India has a lot of competitive exams and things like that. They built an AI bot completely on Astra that actually interacts with text, images, so it's multimodal with audio. And they went from zero to production in 2 months, less than 2 months, 55 days to be precise, right? Imagine over 1 billion people, like that's how big the market is, but hundreds of millions of people going off and actually using something like PhysicsWallah. So there's scale involved, but more importantly than scale in the AI world, it's about relevancy, right? Because you have to nail the relevancy part. Otherwise, giving the wrong answer to the doctor, or the wrong recommendation to a patient for SkyPoint, or the wrong answer to a student so that they don't do well on the test is unacceptable. So it's not just about the scale, but it's also about the relevancy.
So can we get slightly more granular there? Like, what is the role Astra plays and the DataStax offerings play in them being able to accomplish that?
You have LLMs. Pick the LLM you want, right? You could use Llama 2 if you want. Use OpenAI. Let's use OpenAI as an example. So you have LLMs that have digested a lot of information from the world at large, and it is available as an API. Now you have specific information available. Let's take SkyPoint as an example about me the patient, right? You're not going to take that information and fine tune it with the LLM. You're going to keep that in a separate database. There's HIPAA rules, things like that. So now there's a doctor, let's assume it's you. You need a recommendation about me instead of you doing all the work and making, what does Chet need? But Chet's information is stored in a database. So you write an agent, right? The agent retrieves information from the LLM, creates what we call a creates some new content from the LLM based on the prompt that it was given. Now that data needs to be mixed or needs to be merged with Chet Kapoor's personal data outside of the LLM. And now you take what the LLM, for example, a good example would be, what are medicines that you give based on this particular symptom? You may be able to ask somebody, and so you bring that into a corpus of data. Then you mix it with Chet's medical history, and you come up with a specific recommendation for Chet. So that's what retrieval augmented generation is about. You retrieve something, you augment it with Chet, and then you generate some recommendations so that you, the doctor, can give me, the patient. Does that help?
Yeah. So, like, can I give you a different use case and you tell me where data?
Sure.
So, let's say that I've got my charity Child Rescue Association that combats child trafficking. Right.
Yeah.
One of the main things traffickers do is they move kids across state lines, so it's harder for cops to follow them. Right. So let's say we're going to build a product for law enforcement across America to be able to catch these guys who are hurting kids. And so we want to be able to feed in a bunch of like proprietary law enforcement databases, maybe even some intelligence agency databases that, are possibly even classified databases, right? And that needs to stay classified, right? But we want to be able to have AI advise this cop on, they want to work on counter trafficking in their city, and they're saying they want to have AI help them recruit a source and say, like, okay, who should we be approaching? Like, who has the common characteristics that we might be able to turn them and have them tell us where the gang is moving the kids and whatever. And we're going to try and recruit an informant. How can we have the database tell us who has a high probability? And they can go back through. It can be trained on years of these are things that make a criminal more likely to cooperate with law enforcement or not. But it's like, okay, we can have generalities of what will be helpful, but then we need to combine it with a proprietary database that cannot be opened up to the internet, and then get a recommendation for this cop. What would DataStax role be in something like that?
So DataStax would take all the information that is in the proprietary databases and actually vectorize it. So because remember, when you're creating a generative AI, the only language it understands is embeddings, right? And so you take all the data that, the law enforcement data from the state of California, state of Arizona, Nevada, and you go off and actually create embeddings, right? You actually vectorize that data so that when you actually do a search on a bad actor, you are actually getting the information, and it's called proximity searches. So what you're doing is you're saying, this is the bad actor around this person. Who are the people across state lines, across multiple databases, right? Who could actually tell me where to find this person. So it actually works phenomenally well. I'll give you an example, a flip one on financial services. Tell me how much money I spend. Tom, tell me how much money I spend on average in this zip code versus the other zip code. That's all it is. You're creating a nice little boundary and saying, do I spend more money when I go to Cupertino, as an example, or do I spend more money when I go to San Francisco? The answer is always San Francisco, by the way. But nevertheless, right? How do you do that? So what you're taking all these different stores and you're putting them into a proximity, and then you're going to do a search based on your or my, purchase history. That's exactly what the use case that you talked about.
So thinking about, founders who are listening today or investment fund managers who are listening today, there's a lot of jargon in the AI world, and a lot of us feel dumb raising your hand and being like, what does that actually mean? So I only know some of this stuff because my business partner, my brother, is like obsessed with AI and keeps building small tools for our company. And
yeah,
he starts talking to me and he's like, do you know what that word means? I'm like, no. So let's start with vectorize, right? What does it mean to vectorize information?
So you need to take all the data and actually, so there's two parts, right? Just to be clear. And this is where DataStax does really well, shameless commercial. But what Cassandra does really well is it writes very quickly. Think of a clickstream, and it writes very quickly. It is something that's done phenomenally well for a long time. And so that is what That is what Cassandra does. The good news is it only doesn't write the information, but it actually vectorizes it. What it says is Chet Kapoor is I'm going to put the data in. Here's all the data about his transaction or her transaction history. And now I'm actually going to create embeddings around it so it can be searched. So they'll actually literally put a longitude and latitude towards it so that it is searchable based on that. That's what vectorizing it. Now, you can do that for new data, but you can also do it for existing data because it is that embedding that you actually land up searching for. Because then what you do is say, here's Chet Kapoor's actual longitude and latitude, or this is what the vectorized data looks like. Who are the people that Chet knows around him based on how close are other people like him, based on how many, like we talked about earlier, how many CEOs have taken a company public? How many CEOs have taken a company public and been bought by Google? You see how the number of people who've taken a company public is big, but the number of people who've actually taken a company public and sold to GCP Google is probably 10, right? So that's what proximity search does, because it takes my characteristics and actually create embeddings that can be searched on.
So let's say I'm a CEO listening to this episode today and I'm saying, okay, this sounds awesome, and I'm getting a glimmer for how we could potentially use this. I'm still decently intimidated because it feels like a big black box. What are my baby steps? How do I get started? What do I do if I go to the DataStax website?
I think you start, and this is the non-DataStax answer. I think you start by saying, do I have a marketing function that creates content? Just start there. And if you do, please use a bunch of tools out there. You don't have to just use OpenAI. There's Jasper. There are a bunch of other tools that will help you with content creation, and they will do it just as well. And they will do it in your voice. You can actually train them to do it in your voice. So start there. Second thing, on the legal side, right? Start doing contract reviews with a bunch of like apps out there, because they will be more accurate over a period of time. Doesn't mean you don't need lawyers, but start just making those easy. That's not a DataStax use case, but make that happen. So that's what I call incremental use cases. If you have programmers, start using GitHub Copilot, right? Those are easy. If you have a chatbot on your website, go ahead and make sure that you can, whatever company you use, GitHub, HubSpot, ServiceNow, whatever you use, they have now added Gen AI capability to it. So go ahead and use those. Those are what I call out of the box kinds of things, incremental use cases. The really cool stuff happens when you actually start experimenting with your own core processes. That's when you realize the value of it, right? In a good way. And so for that, you will have to use, like you said, you'll have to use an LLM, and you'll have to use your contextual data about your business, and you have to bring those together. To bring those together, you'll have to build custom apps, right? And that's the next step. Those are the transformative use cases.
So, like, here's an example, I think, and I want you to tell if I'm on the right track. So, well, actually, before we do this, we're going to take a slight tangent.
Sure.
We need to tell everybody about your podcast. How many episodes do you think you've done so far?
I actually don't know, but I would think there's about, I would say 30 or 40, maybe a little bit more.
Well, everybody should go check out the Inspired Execution podcast. Tell us a couple of your favorite guests. I know it's an impressive list. That might be hard to narrow down.
It is very hard to narrow it down. I will tell you I'll tell you where it started. It started with me knowing a bunch of people that I talk to very often. I said, and we talk about all the things we talk about on a podcast in our one-on-one discussion. So I said, why don't we do this for a bunch of people outside the room? That's where it started. So if you look at, the first season, the second season is a bunch of people I know. You can notice the chemistry, all that stuff. But then we started to expand into a different group of people I didn't know. And that I thought, intimidating as it might have been in the beginning, it's actually been phenomenal. Getting to know people that I don't know through a podcast has actually been very interesting, right? Because there's genuine learning for me rather than just saying, hey, let me banter with Rob Carter because I talk to him often.
For any other CEOs who are thinking about starting a show and they're kind of on the fence, what would be another thing you tell them of the advantage of not just having the marketing department do something, but the actual face of the company?
So here's what I would say. Do it on a subject you're passionate about, right? Leadership is hard, right? And the second thing is, because you're passionate, make sure you contribute to the podcast. This is the interesting thing about the podcast is a lot like you, Jess. I'm actually, I think it's about a 70-30 what the guest talks about and how much the guest talks and how much I do. But I actually interject my comments all the way through. And so for me, it's actually fun, right? So my suggestion to the CEOs would be, do it because you look forward to it, not because it's a chore, right? So, that would be my recommendation, right? To anybody who's starting one new,
No, that's great.
because the energy needs to come through, right? You need to like show up like you're really interested in doing this.
Well, this is probably like a bad philosophy, but like my whole philosophy for my show and all our clients at Greystoke Networks who we make shows for is like, if I'm having fun and the guest is having fun, then the people listening are going to be having fun.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
It's like, as long as the team does a really good job on selection of like the only people on the show are people I actually want to learn from.
Yeah.
Right. Then it's easy to just be curious. And like, I don't really think that much about the audience. I'm thinking about like, what do I want to know? And I just have to assume somebody else wants to know that too.
Yeah. The one thing we've done, because the one thing that we've done, by the way, very related to what you said, is I tell all our guests in the beginning, make sure you present like you're talking to a younger version of yourself. Because the reason I say that is because it takes the bullshit factor to as close to zero as possible. And the second thing I tell them is just let's have some fun. And during that process, there's, let's just make sure we have the debate and the discussion, and it always works out well.
No, that's such good advice. Okay, so inspired execution people, you can go to this DataStax website. It's on Spotify. It's on everywhere. So
Thank you.
Let's go back to the use case. I'm this CEO and I'm saying, oh, I do want to look at transformative things. What's the decision tree look like? What do the baby steps look like?
Start with something that you in your mind think can be automated. Start there. Don't even think about AI. Look at a process, look at what people are doing, and come to your conclusion on what can be automated, right? And once you find that, so that's the first thing you do, identify the use case, and make sure you take what I call a hairy, like something that is deep and is part of your mission critical process, not something on the side. The next thing you do is take a very small sliver of that, and identify what that sliver is that you feel that could prove to you that you could do for the whole thing. The third thing you do is find the right technologists and the right business people and put them together. When I say technologists, make sure you have a good developer on there that understands this, somebody who understands data really well, and then somebody who understands the business. Once you have that together, give them a very small time frame to prove it out, because they will struggle with it, right? They will struggle with it because it's not something that comes naturally to us, right? What happens as people who run companies and lead companies, what happens? What do we see every day? Oh, you want me to do more? I need more people, right? That's the general thing. And so what we're trying to do is undo that, right? No, more work does not have to be more people. More work can be done by automation. And so I think you go off and deliver one thing, prove to yourself and to the people. Remember, you need buy-in from the rest of your company as well. And so once you prove something, everything else works after that.
Yeah.
But it's got to be something important. The mistake, the three things, if I can summarize it, is
please.
who's leading, something important, who's leading it, and short time frames. Those are the three things that matter.
Any rookie mistakes that you see over and over outside of those three?
Yeah, a lot. Number one, large planning process, right? Let me go off and create a committee to make this exam. But the committee could be like, a 20-person startup. Let 6 people figure it out. No, I think you get 2 people to figure it out. You pick a project, you assume that you might fail. It's small, it's very thin, and then you go off and deliver in a short time frame. The worst case is throw away. but you've learned a lot in the process. So number one, it's a committee. Number two, they go off and they don't make the project very specific. And so then what you land up doing is you land up boiling the ocean, and it takes you 6 months and you realize you haven't done shit. And so the rookie mistakes are, it's not a committee discussion. And the second thing is they don't keep it small and executable right away.
When you think about the enterprises, whether they're your customers or not, that are doing a good job, that are like approaching AI in the right way and moving towards transformation, what are any commonalities you see between those enterprises?
First one is believing that this is real. So and what I mean by that is, there's two attitudes. I think there's something here. Prove to me that there is. That's one attitude. The second one is, this is real. I'm going to lean into it. The set of companies and leaders that do the latter are the ones that will win. The ones that do the former are the ones that will be disrupted over a period of time. And so that's what it comes down to, is how do you lean into this? And it doesn't matter. You will always start from an incremental use case before you go to a transformative use case, right? But it's like, are you leaning into this? Do you firmly believe? It just comes down to simple thing, because a business executive, just like you, may not know the details of what RAG is, or what fine tuning is, or what an embedding is, and things like that, right? That's fine. It just comes down to a fundamental question you have to ask yourself. Are people with AI better than just people? It's not AI versus people. Is it people with AI better than just people? If the answer to that is maybe, you're in the first category. If the answer to that is hell yeah, then you're in the second category, which is you're leading in.
Let's talk more about this, about it not being AI versus people, AI with people.
A lot of people talk about general artificial intelligence. OpenAI started there. They've obviously they're still doing that, but they're doing other things as well. I firmly believe that we will have multiple agents as knowledge workers that do things for us. So let me give you an example, Jess. Do you remember life before Google Maps? What would you do?
Go on MapQuest and print it out, or before that, you had like a Thomas guide.
Yeah. So you go and do that, and you did that.
The coil down thing.
Correct. So you did that, right? You could see what the roads were, and you were driving. Somebody next to you had the book open to kind of make sure you were driving that. What did Google Maps do? It automated things for you. What is Google Maps? Google Maps is an agent.
Okay.
That's all it is. Now, imagine so many more agents that can come around in your life to help you with tasks like driving. Do you ever worry about directions anymore? Never. You know why?
Yeah, when my phone is on like 3%. I get really, like some other city. My phone's on 3%. I don't have a car charger. I get very anxious.
That's a personal problem. I'm sorry. I do not think tech can help you with that. So my take is actually technology will help you with that. But nevertheless, that's an agent. That's Chet versus Jess with Maps, right? So think about me with Thomas Guide, you with Maps. Who wins? With Maps. By the way, this will happen across the board. And I'm using Maps because people understand what Maps is, and it happens. There'll be countless other agents that automate things for you, right? That happen, like things that I do. There's no reason why 50% of my email cannot be automated by some agent reading it and responding to it based on my behavior, not something that somebody imposes because my style is different from yours. I'm sure that's going to get automated fairly soon, right? We should have half the bloody meetings be automated. We're already doing that at DataStax, by the way, where we actually go and script out every meeting. It's recorded and we get the TLDRs for it because 50% of the people just need to read the TLDRs and don't need to participate in the discussion. Those are all agents. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, the person with an agent, the person with AI, are they going to be more successful than just people? Now, what lands up happening with this discussion is people immediately go to, well, people are going to lose their jobs, right? Because of that. And there is definitely going to be disruption. There's no doubt about it. It will happen across the industry in many different ways, and it'll be a different pace than we think. No one has ever been right at the pace of transformation in every industry, because every industry behaves differently. But I do think there's going to be displacement. But I think more than displacement, I mean, it happened with the Industrial Revolution, just to be clear, right? But I think we survived. We actually survived really well, and we're better for it. And I think the same thing will happen with generative AI. There's one thing a lot of people don't talk about. What happens in companies that become more productive? What do you normally do when you become more productive? You normally hire more people. You don't fire people when you get more productive. It's only the companies that are not doing well actually land up firing people. So my take is there's a very good chance, a very high likelihood that as companies lean into this, as leaders lean into this, and they go off through the incremental and transformative use cases, we will actually hire people to do different things than we're hiring them now, but we will actually be hiring people. So
Yeah,
I'm
listen,
obviously optimistic about this.
well, my great-grandparents were farmers, right? And you can see it as like mourning the like, oh, they lost their jobs because we built giant combines that could do the work of 20 people.
Right.
And you can lament that my family isn't in farming anymore, and that they switched to other industries. Or you can look at the incredible thing that 100 years ago, most people were dying from starvation, from undernutrition, and now we have the reverse problem. Most people are dying from overeating, right? And
No
and
doubt about that.
okay, but like, I mean, you want to talk about the short-term pain. I don't want to minimize that. There will absolutely be short-term pain for people reskilling, retooling, and don't get me wrong, like entrepreneurship, real life is a bumpy sport. Like there's some people it will not be nice to, and I think there's a real opportunity for people in getting in the reskilling business and getting in the retooling business, and there's probably some obligation for government to assist with that, right? But you look at the net positive of the world, and it's like, like your Google Maps versus Thomas Guide example is just a microcosm of the huge advantage, right?
And it's going to, and by the way, I do agree with you. And we talked about the dean of the Air Force Academy, and we spent a little bit of time talking about government and how they need to be actively involved. Unlike every other technology wave, this time around, we will need government involvement sooner rather than later,
Because
because
the displacement's likely to happen so fast.
because displacement, but also because unlike the others, the depth of bad actors, how much damage they can do, is going to be more significant than we've seen before, right? This will make everything that we saw during our last election look like kind of small, right? Or we saw in the election before that. It'll look really small. So there's a lot you can do with Gen AI because of how powerful it is. And the good news is we're starting to get ahead, right? You can see Stanford University has foundational model transparency index now. And so they are rating all the models, right? I think the government is starting to get involved a little bit. And so she asked me, Chet, what would you suggest, right, that we do better? And my take was, please make sure that the lawmakers don't come into this saying that they need to regulate it. What they have to come in and do is say that they want to find a way to accelerate, not slow it down, but do it with guardrails, right? Because if it's going like this and you bring it like this, I think that's a good thing. And that's a mindset. By the way, I'm sure many of our lawmakers will not see it that way. But I think the ones that do will actually help the cause quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, what do you think are the biggest takeaways for CEOs listening today?
Go fast, go hard, go now. Right? Because if you don't, somebody else will. And I get a chance because of where our position is, how we are strategic partners to our customers. I land up just not talking to the CIOs and CTOs. I land up talking to CEOs and I land up talking to boards. I'm not suggesting you need to change your P&L over the next 9 to 12 months. All I'm suggesting is lean into it and understand it, because everybody else is, right? I mean, let me give you an interesting stat. About 20% of our number of customers is actually from financial services. If I look at the Gen AI conversations, 35% of them are financial services. Banks are not going to implement this quickly, but they are leaning hard into this, right? Because they absolutely believe that they'll create efficiencies and new revenue opportunities they never thought about before. So go now, go hard, go fast.
Well, I know we're winding down here. I want to talk about one of my favorite things about you. I get to talk to so many different founders, so many different CEOs. You've got to be one of the most enthusiastic. And like I've once heard that leadership is the transfer of enthusiasm. For people who want to be more like you in that way, A, what helps you be this enthusiastic? And B, do you have any other thoughts on it?
I believe very deeply in what I do. And I think it starts there. If you don't, you cannot be passionate about it. There are different people. Passion shows up in different ways. Some people use their hands a lot. Some people don't. Some people don't move around a lot. But it doesn't mean they're not passionate. Passion will come and grab you, just like laughter will. And there are millions of ways people laugh, right? I think passion is it's contagious, right? Because it's like laughter and making that happen. But you have to start by believing. The reason you see me be energetic and passionate about stuff is because I really believe in what I'm doing. And the second thing is I believe in the people I do it with. Why is the second part so important? Because you cannot do it alone, right? If you do not believe, if you just believe in the cause and not people who also believe in the cause with you, then you're just going to have a great cause and you're not going to be able to have the outcomes you want to have. So it's what you believe in and who you're working with on a regular basis to make it a reality.
Okay, well, this harks back to my favorite thing from our interview a year and a half ago. I had told you that like the notes I'd taken from our first meeting was to be me and to lead from the heart. And you had talked about this HBS article, Harvard Business School article for CEOs that had this quote, at the end of the day, leadership is about moving the human heart. And kind of this concept of like the real you talking to the real them instead of hiding behind insecurities. And I think my favorite quote from the last one was, if you can find out what you really love doing and do it with people you like, then all problems become worth solving.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Like 100%. And what I just said was a variation of that, right? Because problems, as I say about problems, I'm always going to have the same number of problems any given day of the week. I just want to make sure I don't have the problems I had yesterday. I want new problems. And when the new problems show up, I want to make sure that I have conviction, that I want to solve them. And I want to do it with a set of people that have the same amount of conviction as I do. Right. And that's what makes a difference. Otherwise, it's just a job.
Yeah, I love it. It's like an unfair advantage. It's
always.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay, everyone, go tune into Inspired Execution and listen to Chet's conversations with everyone else. Go to DataStax, check it out. Chet, what do you want to leave people with today?
People with AI versus people. That is the question you have to answer. And you should answer it really fast for yourself.
Okay, everyone. Bye.